The only other podcast that I ever did on this channel was with Tucker Gott. I've done the Paramotor podcast in the past where it's just all about what?
He's going to be way more interesting to watch than anything I have to say.
I prefaced that episode like just holding my cell phone before rolling the footage that the conversation that I had with Tucker saying, and in the future, I've got an FBI neighbor who his wife also is an FBI agent.
Instead, you get me.
Yeah, so
I'm just his neighbor.
He's not the neighbor. I went and found another FBI agent. I mean, obviously, I do want to learn like about what it's like to be an FBI agent, how boring it can be.
So you want to talk about boring stuff today, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Like nobody's going to watch this.
Let's make this so boring that no one will watch.
Absolutely.
Cool.
But I'm way more interested in just the shooting the shit, and hopefully we can get to the point where. I mean, I literally just shot the shit in the toilet right before coming out here.
Well, I hope you're editing that part out just for the sake of,
I might. Nobody's going to watch this.
That's probably for the best.
That's how I start out every show.
Yeah.
No.
And then nobody watches it.
Apparently
everyone watched your one about Zinn, though.
I know. Holy shit.
That took a turn.
Yeah. Did you end up reading the blog post?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did I do a good job writing that up?
Define good job.
Yeah.
No, if I could be completely frank with you, I'm not surprised people.
So for the people who don't know, because not many people will know, because I took the video down. It's been years since I ever took down a video on YouTube. There was one time where Child Protective Services was involved. I don't really want to go into that.
Should I be sitting here?
Had to take that video down. Years ago, I took a video down because I rode my little pit bike through the house. And when the kids weren't even here and CPS rolled up, somebody in the comments section said, "Are you high on cocaine?" And I jokingly was like, haha, yeah. And it's like, but obviously I'm not. I was just messing around in the comment section.
Yeah. Not at all.
No, I don't do that shit. But it was so ridiculous because I got a knock at the door and it's Child Protective Services and they say, "Can we drug test you for cocaine? Because you said this in the comments." Somebody reported you, which I thought, these backstabbing subscribers, like it's one of you out there. You're probably watching this video. I was like, yes, you can do this drug test, but I feel like this is invasive. It's stupid. It's a comment and I wasn't serious. And I don't do cocaine.
Yeah, there's always room for the future, right? Never say never.
So they do the drug test and it provides an immediate result showing that, like, I think it's one of those ones that shows like the last 28 days approximately. How long does a drug test kind of like?
I'm not a narc.
Ah.
Yeah, sorry. I don't know.
The things FBI agents don't know.
Well, did they give you a choice? Like, what did they say was going to happen if you said no?
It was kind of like led to believe that it would not be in my best interest. So I said yes, and it showed up negative. And I was like, there you go. And they said, but we need you to come downtown to do like a hair follicle drug test or something. I was so angry.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, and I remember asking them, will this close this out? Like if I do this and it shows no, like I'm saying.
Right.
I don't know. I don't think it was like the answer I was looking for, but I was just like compliant. So I go downtown and they cut out like chunks of my hair. And I mean, it really, like you could really see patches of hair missing.
That's disappointing. You have such a wonderful head of hair.
Thank you.
I'm so jealous.
Thank you. And once again, so I go down there and no drugs in my system.
Right.
Still, they kept coming to the house. Like they have to do inspections of the home. They're checking the bedrooms. They're looking in the pantry, checking the kids, making sure that they're not abused in any way. And eventually I contacted my aunt and uncle who are like the lawyers in the family.
The family or the family? Like which you like the mafia
family? The family.
Yeah.
No, it's the uncle who recently won the district attorney of Los Angeles.
Oh,
and so
is that all?
Yeah, not a big deal.
No big deal.
But he, I guess they made a phone call to whoever in El Paso, and like the next day they came to the door and they apologized and said we're closing out the case. But it had actually been going on for like 4 months. So that is the first time that I had taken a video off of YouTube.
I don't want to keep interrupting you. I'm really sorry for that.
No.
But like hearing that is just very frustrating. And unfortunately, because you said who I work for, I can't say what I want to say.
Yeah.
And we can absolutely talk about that offline. But like, I understand
Well,
the
it wasn't the
frustration.
FBI.
I
Although
don't
have.
think I can go giving personal opinions about
who it was at the front door, or
any other
opinions of government
organization like
agencies.
that in general. It kind of gives a bad look, or a good look. Could be a really good one.
Right.
But yeah, I don't think I can opine on those kinds of things. But unfortunately, because that's like it'd be like 90% of what you want me to do.
No, I'll get it out of you.
I can't
one
do
way
it.
or another. I'll get it out of you. I've got some like tools that cause pain, and eventually you will speak.
Yeah, but it'll only be my safe word. So.
So that was the first time that I've only removed 2 videos. That was the first one.
Yeah.
And then I removed this nicotine one, which was like,
Oh, that's how we got there.
yeah, a little bit of a segue. But you know, like I haven't been using any nicotine throughout this recovery.
Yeah.
Because one, it really impacts bone recovery. Hold on. Basically, the way that I got to wanting to record that video was I was in the hospital recovering from this big arm surgery, and one of the doctors came to my room. He was a doctor of anesthesia.
Oh, okay.
And so he's just got some downtime, so he's sitting and we're just shooting the shit. And he sees that I have like Zyn in the hospital, I'm like just out of surgery. I'm like, give me the Zyn. And I offered him one. He's like, oh yes, please. And so I was asking him, I said, based off of like the Google searches that I've done, that I've heard that nicotine itself isn't really the harmful thing. And he let me know quickly. He's like, well, it isn't good for times of recovery. Like you shouldn't be using nicotine when your body's trying to recover because of vasoconstriction and it like affects the osteoblasts or whatever.
Right.
But he said like, other than that, there's like a lot of doctors, like he's like, it's undeniable that smoking and chewing tobacco are really, really harmful for you.
Yeah.
But of all the studies that they've done on nicotine, like as a standalone ingredient, like it's not actually bad for you.
Right.
And so I come home, I'm like messing around with the 3D printer, and I wanted to challenge myself to make like a video in 24 hours. And I was like, what could I do?
That explains the quality.
Yeah, that does explain a lot.
The booger hanging out of your nose the whole time.
I know. Yeah, I didn't really prepare. But what I do is I take to my computer, I write down a script, and I'm basically thinking of all of the things that the doctor had said to me there. And then in addition to that, just the things that I had found online.
Yeah.
And I was like, I think this is valuable information because I still have friends from the military who smoke cigarettes and use chewing tobacco. And I'm sure that in the Bureau that there's probably people who chew tobacco or use Zyn, I'm sure. Because
there's one of my buddies on the team that he'll come in from a run and just the cigar is immediately in his mouth. Yeah.
Okay.
So
yeah.
You know,
I was very clear in saying how during recovery, this slows bone regrowth and soft tissue regrowth. And so it's really not ideal for an individual who's recovering.
Yeah.
But there are studies that show that nicotine prevents
if you tell me memory loss and you're struggling to find the word,
well, clearly it's not. So I felt like, let me give like an unbiased video because big tobacco can't go out on TV and promote their product, but they have little channels where they can get to YouTubers and I'm sure Instagram people, and they're like, in Tucker Carlson, for example, who openly promotes Zyn. I'm sure that there's some sort of a backing for that, but meaning that those positions of in that influence is going to be biased. On the other hand, you have anti-tobacco organizations who don't care if it's just the extract of nicotine by itself, just its affiliation with cigarettes and it's god awful, rightfully so, like history. It is bad shit.
Yeah.
They will demonize the nicotine, and like, for example, until where there's federal implications to where Zyn is being banned in certain ways. And it's like, I mentioned in the video that probably the worst aspect of nicotine is the addiction. It is unbelievably addictive. One of the most addictive substances that there is, like probably up there with heroin or heroin, depending on which walk of life you come from. In the comment section, I want to acknowledge that it was overwhelmingly supportive. Like, oh, great video, like really rich in information. But then there was like one comment when I woke up the next day, and it's like, nice ad, unsubbed. And so Leandra came and woke me up in bed because I was so depressed. I couldn't get out of bed. And she was like...
because you didn't have nicotine.
I didn't have the nicotine.
Yeah, that's
right.
why.
I was just a wreck.
It wasn't because of the video.
Yeah, my hair was all a mess. But she told me, she's like, you might want to consider taking down the video.
Yeah.
And I felt like, damn it. Because, you know, aside from just preparing the video, the work that goes into writing a script, setting up all these cameras, the amount of money invested into the lights and the cameras and the microphones and all this other stuff.
Oh, you've put money into this?
Yeah.
As you sit in your student desks circa 1976.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because it's just unfortunate for somebody to take it the wrong way, which obviously people will inevitably do.
Yeah.
But it hurts when somebody misrepresents you or makes you out to be somebody who would take advantage. Like, I basically to say call it an advertisement makes me feel like you think I'm trying to promote it to youngsters who I would like totally. If it was my kids, I would totally be against anybody picking up nicotine. And what I find interesting, I don't know if your experience in the military was the same because you were an officer and in the Air Force, which is the prestigious branch.
And I would have been in the Space Force.
I would have had the Space Force been there.
Yeah.
But in the Army, like I worked in the hospital, and I remember one day we got this briefing where we had to watch, it's like death by PowerPoints, annual.
Yeah, the safety briefings that nobody pays attention to, but now you've been briefed, so when you get in trouble, it's your fault.
Exactly.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yep.
So there was one on like soldiers and stress and whatever. And
you paid attention.
It was so crazy because on this very polished Army official video, there was a doctor, I kid you not, recommending to individuals with stress to smoke a cigarette. I swear, if anybody watching this video was in the military and can recall a video where they promoted smoking, a government agency.
Are you sure this wasn't like a holdover from like World War II? It was like,
yeah.
That's right, boys. Go get them. Have a cigarette. You earned it.
It's part of your rations.
Oh, we have a story about K rations, but
oh, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah.
But what were your thoughts
about your video?
You could see where somebody could interpret it as a promotion.
Yeah, I mean,
somebody like the thumbnail, for example. People were like, "You're holding a Zin can, and it looks kind of promotional."
My honest personal opinion is people are soft, and you put yourself out there in a way that those people aren't. It's so easy to sit behind a keyboard and make snap decisions about a 5-second clip or a picture on the internet and be like, wow, blah, blah, blah. So, for instance, law enforcement, right? We don't exactly have the best press right now in the news media. The FBI certainly doesn't right now, right? Yeah. Through no fault of my own or the folks I work with. And so, yeah, it can be really frustrating to read comments about people that are keyboard warriors that think they have all the answers. Or, jailhouse lawyers that are like, wow, blah, 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 So I frame it similarly to that. And I think, you know what, dude, just keep doing what you're doing. Like, like you're exploring your creative side here. You're doing something positive with your recovery. You're doing something to try to reach people that maybe through similar circumstances or have a mental issue or a physical issue that they're trying to push through, and anything like that is valuable. Now, I'm not going to blow smoke up your butt.
Please.
That's a different video.
Same couch, different video.
Yeah. You just keep putting yourself out there, man. Like you're doing a good thing, and did I see it coming a little bit with the nicotine? I was like, oh, this is a different direction. Yeah.
Yeah. Super out of left field too.
Yeah.
It's like,
And I mean, that's when I made the crack about, are you just trying to resell all your Zyn right now? You know, because it's just like,
because I can't use it.
Yeah.
And people commented, they were like saying, well, you know, people who, you know, friends of mine were saying, well, you've got it kind of like stacked up. And so it looks like a little bit of a glorification of Zyn. And it's like, that's all the leftover ones that I use because they have the rewards thing where that you get points. So I don't throw them away.
Like the camel points back in the day.
Yeah, like the camel.
You can get a shirt along with your cancer.
Big tobacco. They sure have it figured out. But, you know, so like you mentioned, when you see things like that are negative, like especially in the news about the FBI, does it piss you off? What does it make you feel?
Yeah, we're towing a line here, I think.
Well, I mean, it's not,
I feel like we're going to do that.
I don't think it should. I mean, because you're still representing. These are just like not there. Okay, so you have individuals who, the vast majority of individuals probably deeply respect the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The majority. There's obviously going to be those loud, vocal ones who don't. Like
is that what FBI stands for?
I know. I was like, how many female bodies have you investigated?
Well, that's a different story altogether. People do disgusting things on their phone. Anyway.
Yeah. Because I still want to dive into what you specifically do,
sure,
and then just kind of figuring out the other ones. But since we're on the topic of like,
sure, let's go right into ruining my career. Yeah, that's an interesting question. So, does it upset me? Sometimes, depends on who's saying it, right? Yeah. Where the vitriol is coming from. When an average person is upset by it, not necessarily, because I think they're just feeding off of, they're just feeding off what they're seeing in the news.
Yeah.
Whether it be folks that may be less law enforcement friendly or folks that are less FBI specific friendly. I think we know kind of which direction we're talking about on the philosophical line there. Yeah, I mean, it'll bug me, but then, like, you know, what I do is I just go back to work. Right. So, like, at the end of the day, my job is pretty simple. Like, I've sworn oaths to my country, just like you did, just like a lot of military folks did. Yeah. On top of the one I took for when I was in the military, right? Like, so, like, obviously, I firmly believe in what I'm doing.
And this isn't your first rodeo. I mean, you were in the Air Force, and can you mention what you did? Just
in the Air Force?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I started off as a nuclear launch officer. So believe it or not, we actually have intercontinental ballistic missiles in the United States still. That is a little bit of a holdover from the Cold War. But I was stationed in North Dakota, where I was ultimately a flight commander for a crew of missileers that, you know, should something bad pop off in the world and ICBMs are inbound, we'd be the ones firing back, and basically the reason why the world would go into nuclear winter.
Oh, okay.
So that was, you know, nothing that we really had to think about too much. You know?
You say North Dakota. What's the exact location, like coordinates of the silo you worked in?
I worked in a bunch of different ones, and it's out of Minot Air Force Base.
I know. I'm just fucking with you.
No, I know you are. I was about to be like, you just Google map it, dude. Like,
are they really? You can see kind of like, does Google doesn't block like the actual locations, or is there anything that they do to, because it is in the best interest of the country to not have the specific locations of our number one line of defense or offense?
I wouldn't say they're the number one line of defense. they're like the very last line of defense. Yeah. I always liked it when my commanders,
if there's anything wrong, hit the button.
Yeah, I always liked it when my commanders used to call us the tip of the spear, and I was like, isn't that like, you mean the tip of the butt of the spear, right?
Yeah, because like this
we're most definitely not the first thing. Like, I know what they were saying, like, diplomatically, you know, the reason Russia doesn't invade.
If you could snap your fingers and do away with all nuclear weapons, would you?
In the U.S. or everywhere?
Everywhere.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Easy question.
Yeah, I mean, like, of course. I do have a quick story if you want to hear it, and it's totally inappropriate and it's great.
Yeah, I love it.
So, obviously there's the START treaty stuff with Russia, and So basically like you would get inspectors that would come from Russia that would go and look at a facility, that kind of thing. And then we would send them out there. So I guess later that evening, our security guys were going around looking at the different areas, and there's a big pile of human shit in the middle of one of the facilities. So and nobody knew how it got there. So we just called it the mysterious case of the Ruski Dooski. So they left us a little present. So yeah. I don't know. You probably should edit that one out.
How does a nuclear weapon end up getting launched in a position like can it only come from like the president, or how does that work?
Ooh, I don't remember what I can say and what I can't say.
Well,
but can't say what I can't say.
What's the launch sequence? Like, like what
are the codes?
order?
What do you have to do?
Are there codes? Like,
yeah, dude. Like, I honestly don't remember what part is like just FOUO or classified out of.
How many people work
for official use only for non-govies?
There's a lot of people in these. How big are these?
Okay. Well, I guess it depends on what you're talking about. So there's the launch facilities themselves, which is where I worked.
And these are underground
missile alert facilities. There's an above ground and a below ground portion.
Okay.
So I worked in the below ground portion, which is why I had such a wonderful tan when I was there. And also North Dakota, we had a lot of sunshine.
Yeah, it didn't even matter if you were outside.
A lot of frostbite and wind burn on my face.
Shriveled peepees.
Well, I mean, that's just my normal state of beings. Definitely a grower. So at any given time, there were two of us manning the facility, the launch facility.
Yeah.
However many feet underground in a capsule that's probably not a hell of a lot bigger than your garage, just in a different shape. With a bunch of equipment and stuff that looks like it came from like a 1965 movie about the future kind of thing. Like just like really weird looking machines that are so obsolete now, but we still use them.
Yeah.
And a lot of carcinogenic material everywhere, which is...
What do you mean?
So there's these anti-electric... I can't remember the exact word for it. They're PCBs, polychlorinated biphenyls, I think, and they're basically just really carcinogenic and can give you
cancer.
Yeah. And it was basically like, if you touch it, you're going to die kind of stuff. And it's like everywhere in the capsule. And they were just like, yeah, but you're fine.
Yeah.
So
it's for your country.
There was a recent study that came out that not where I worked, but in one of the other missile bases, there's been a cluster of guys that have been getting have a higher proclivity for like non-Hodgkin's and other leukemias and lymphomas and stuff like that. And of course, like in typical like military fashion, they did the whole like, no, you're fine. There's nothing here. Yeah. And then this doctor, I think he was in the Air Force. He pushed it and like finally got the recognition that those guys like needed, right? Because like it's government, but you know. And so interesting, but there's a bunch of machines down there. There's another, there's a portion where I sat in, there's some security features. And then there's another side that has, like equipment that are like backup equipment and stuff like that. And you pretty much are down there for, well, at least when I was there, I don't know if they've changed the schedules up or not. But when I was down there, your work day was basically, you'd go in, you get your briefing of what's happening for the day. Sometimes like an intelligence brief about what's going on in the world. Yeah. Then you drive out to your site, where I was in Minot.
It was always the same spot for you.
No. I went to, I think, every different facility there is out there. I don't think I missed a single one.
Wow.
So there's 5 per squadron, 3 squadrons. So like at least 2. Different buildings that I worked in. You know, you go to the different facility. I think the closest one was like just under an hour, and the furthest one was several hours away. Wow. And that's not even the worst. So like the guys that are in Montana, they have their squadron, what they call the Farsighters. I don't know if they still call them that, but at least when I was around, they did. And those guys have like a 5-6 hour drive
Is North Dakota one of the most dense in as far as these silos go, or are there other states that?
So the 3 states that have them, or at least the 3 missile bases, there's Minot, F.E. Warren, and there's Malmstrom, and they're all composed of 3 missile squadrons making up the group, and those 3 squadrons all have the same number of facilities. Yeah, and that's. Did
you choose this? Like, were you or selected, or how did you end up in this position?
Well, somebody said there was a line over there and they're giving out pizza. So I joined the Air Force after college. I had spent a couple of years in the private sector just trying to figure out what I was going to do.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, I'm from Massachusetts, and I spent a couple of years after college just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Kind of always wanted to serve. I originally wanted to do the Army, and then like after a one-way discussion with my parents in which they were just like, "We're basically going to disown you if you do that." I'm kidding. Kind of.
Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad.
Yeah, I love you guys. I ended up joining the Air Force, and I couldn't be rated as a pilot because of some medical stuff, and so I ended up on. At the time, it was a joint. We call them AFSC instead of MOS, but it's the same thing. And so I ended up on a space and missile track. Went to Vandenberg after my basic in Alabama. Spent a year in Vandenberg learning how to be a space officer for a couple of months. And then they were like, "Hey, congratulations, you're going to Minot, North Dakota as a missile guy." And I was like,
yeah.
Yay. Even the instructors were kind of shitty about it, to be honest with you. I remember I actually, as a young lieutenant, was already being kind of a contrarian. And like, I remember they were handing out the assignments. Mm-hmm. So guys who knew they were going to like the cool places like Vandenberg in Florida for space stuff, they were like all excited for him. And then when it was like the Minot people, they were just like, "Oh man, Minot." And I actually called out the lieutenant colonel. I was like, "What the fuck is this about? Like, really? Hey, how about a round of applause for the guys that are going to Minot? We should be excited about this, right?" I have a bad history with higher ranking officers.
Yeah.
That's why I got out. Well, not the reason.
How long were you in the Air Force?
8 years, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so 2009 is when I commissioned. Graduated college 2006, 2009 commissioned, and then I got out of active duty in 17, and I stopped reserves in like 20.
Did you do ROTC?
Mm-mm.
Okay.
No, I went to, they call it OTS in the Air Force because everything has to be different. Instead of OCS, it's OTS, Officer Training School.
Gotcha.
That's down in Alabama, Montgomery, Alabama.
What's your degree in?
Biology.
Oh.
Have we never talked about that?
No, I'd love to learn more about pandemics. Can you, like biology, that's the...
Well, when we're not spreading them. I mean, I said I graduated college in 2006. Do you think I remember much of anything from my year?
No. Yeah. Good point. In the missile silos, like what are the, if something were to occur, like, I mean, in all likelihood, do you think that like probability, it would be more likely that it would be something from Russia or North Korea? I mean, this is just Todd talking.
Well, Todd was still read out of stuff. Todd still can't talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what are the capabilities like the United States? Do you believe that the United States is an equal player when it comes to capabilities? Or do you think that there are nations with stronger powers when it comes to nuclear warfare?
Well, what I can say is that, and I'm reasonably certain this is open source and this is nothing crazy that I'm saying, but I mean, Russia has the most nukes that are active and we have the second most nukes.
Right.
So if any countries are going to destroy the globe for, in perpetuity, it's going to be the US or Russia. But
right.
Yeah, no, I don't think I can really start comparing capabilities.
These nuclear bombs that we're talking about are far more powerful than Hiroshima, Nagasaki.
Yeah, without getting into yields and stuff. Yeah,
Russia
they're more
detonated
powerful,
the Tsar Bomba, right? So like, and that thing was
more like 10 megatons or something crazy that, which is just like the radiation circled the globe like 4 times before it dissipated, something wild like that.
Right. Was that more? That would have been more of a show of force than.
Yeah, that was just because we had detonated our. Oh God, what was the name of the one we did? Before that was like 4 or 6 megatons or something like that.
Was that
some Air Force nerd is like, no, you don't remember. It's like, no, I don't care.
When that was out here, a lot of the testing gets done out here at White Sands.
After a certain period of time, we did most of our testing in the Pacific.
Yeah.
Where they still do all their rocket testing and stuff like that.
Right.
I mean, there's obviously the nuclear test ban treaty, right? So we don't actually touch off nukes anymore.
Okay.
So at least to my knowledge, as far as I know.
I think by the time that I had met you, you were just wrapping up your service in the Air Force, if I remember correctly. Or you were the reserves at that point, right?
Yeah. I think I had gotten out.
Joined the FBI.
Yeah, I was in the process, and I was just doing reserve stuff to keep cash in.
Your wife was Air Force as well, right?
Yep.
And then she joined the Bureau. I didn't even know that. You guys didn't. Yeah. You guys hadn't, told me what you did, or I didn't give a shit to ask you questions.
I was like, this fucking guy.
Yeah, this guy's so selfish. He only wants to talk about himself.
I can't. Oh, nice.
Was your wife? Was she the biggest influence in joining the FBI?
No, she made it easier for me.
Okay.
It's interesting because I remember back when I was, I think, a junior in high school, and I was going to different colleges. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do as far as like a degree.
Yeah.
And I remember this one professor that I was meeting, like he was talking about, he was the head of, I think, his psychology department for the school that I was visiting. And he was just like, well, what is it you want to do? And I was like, well, I mean, I don't know for sure, but like one of the things that sound neat and that I think I'd be interested in doing is like forensic psychology or high risk warrant service for the ATF. And here I am in a job where I do both high risk warrant service and could someday, maybe if I ever like buckled down and got a real degree, go do like the forensic psychology profiler stuff, which is what my wife wants to do.
Oh, which is like you said, that TV show that came out on Netflix, Mindhunters.
I mean, loosely, yeah. Yeah, like the profiler stuff, yeah.
And so what does that entail? Because if that's like your dream job within the FBI, what is that position?
Their extra training is all stuff that you don't know about unless you've been through it. But they're basically the folks that like you give them some pictures and details about a case and like study of like a subject or something like that, and they'll tell you what is most likely. Like if you want to do like an interview of this person, how do I get them to talk kind of thing?
Okay.
And like, what's the most likely way that they'll respond to me? Those kinds of things.
So I'd probably be pretty good at that job because I'm getting all the answers that I want.
I have you?
Yeah, not yet. I'm working on it. But what is it that you're currently doing with the FBI, and how did you arrive in that position?
Sure. I started off on what's called the Violent Crime Squad in El Paso. I did that for 3-ish years.
Yeah.
And so that's just anything from like bank robberies to interstate kidnapping and all this other stuff, right? Like all the kind of the catch-all violent stuff, which is kind of what the FBI's bread and butter was for the longest time before 9/11.
Which was what? What was the bread and butter? Like
violent crime, basically. I mean, that's part of the reason why the FBI
main existence of the FBI.
When it was first brought up, it was kind of to combat bank robbery, violent crime type stuff.
Yeah.
Like
I'm naive. Days. Like I am still trying to understand.
Yeah, you're naive because you still think the FBI is here to help. No, I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding, boss. I'm kidding. We are. I'm from the government.
It's
I'm
funny,
here to help.
Little side note. Todd and I, like, I've been trying to get Todd to do this podcast with me for some time now. And obviously there's like, in any government organization, there's a PAO, Public Affairs Office, and information, just to make sure that it doesn't compromise anything, or including the image of what it is that you do, which I don't know why they hired you.
I know, right?
They're trying to maintain an image.
I actually talked to somebody the other day, and this person was just like, "You're an FBI agent?" I was like,
yeah,
I know. They're really scraping the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah. What does the FBI do?
Well, there's quite a bit. So as I was saying, I started off violent crime, but now I work public corruption, civil rights. So most of my cases now are involving public officials who are abusing their power, either accepting bribes or using their official position.
And you do this mostly in a local capacity, right? Like this is, you're not.
So my area of responsibility is like the El Paso area, right? The El Paso field office covers everything from like the tip of West Texas out to like Midland, Odessa, and that area. And then like within Texas, there are other field offices that cover other areas.
Okay.
I cover this area, but obviously like I'm a federal agent, so you know I can fly anywhere and
if they need support for whatever
that, or if I had a case that led me out there. So I had a subject that lived in the Mid-Atlantics, you know, and so I flew out to go interview them once, that kind of thing. So like it's not a local popo thing where I have to be so reliant on other people. Obviously, the good thing about the FBI, as far as that goes, is like I can just send a lead to another office and be like, can you talk to this person for me, kind of thing. And like that way we don't have to spend the money on us flying. But when it's like a subject interview, yeah, you're going to fly out there.
In the news, there is quite a bit on potential
we're gonna go there
corruption that does happen here in El Paso, where it deepens their pockets.
I think what you're describing would be fraud against the government. That would be something that we would look into.
Yeah. So give me details on an open case right now.
What's the subject's name, date of birth, address, how much is he?
Can you give me an example of a case that has been closed and one that you're able to talk about?
Sure. I actually just briefed some folks about this case the other day. So I had a case where a federal public official who worked along the border was basically he had told a migrant woman that he would get her papers to stay in the U.S. for $5,000. And so we set up we talked to the woman, we set up recorded calls and all that kind of stuff. And then we set up an operation where we basically recorded the bribe happening and then we took him down.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of like the shit that you see on TV, like the actual cool, like worthy of televised type stuff where you,
maybe, I don't know. It's commonplace. It's not commonplace. That sounds bad.
Yeah. We set people up all the time.
We do it all the time. No, it's, you know, I don't want to say it's just another Tuesday, but it's just like, that's my job.
This is kind of in ways, less stressful sector of work that you're doing now compared to violent crimes. I'm sure that there were more emotion. Well, what about the emotional aspect of it? Because you did work the shooting at Walmart, or you were involved in that to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, I helped with some of the evidence collection.
Sure, yeah,
so, something like that. Everybody in the office is
exactly.
Doing their part.
I'm sure something like that, because it's such a national attention thing that everybody, even if it's a little bit of a capacity, you are able to give your personal opinions outside of the because I
you asked the question and I'll
sure we can do that.
I'll make the face if I can't.
Okay. So what's the guy's name who did the Walmart shooting? Do you remember?
I do remember, but I'd actually prefer not to say it.
Okay.
Because I don't think that guy deserves any publicity.
Fair enough. I totally understand. And I know that in the past, that was part of their objective. Like these killers want the notoriety. Is that the right word? They want the fame.
Some of that I think is in there. Yeah. This would be a better question for like the profilers actually.
Oh, okay.
It's largely young white guys for some reason.
Right. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that?
Well, that's what I'm saying is I think, you know, they're becoming militant for whatever reason. A lot of internet like activity, stuff like that. And then there's, you know, like I can't say always a mental health component, but there's often a mental health component.
Yeah.
Or just like the feeling of rejection. There's this whole incel thing that's going on, like where that is something that, you know, like the whole involuntary celibate type of thing.
Sure.
There's a lot of
involuntary celibate.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's been coined as is incel. So the whole idea is basically like women don't like them because of, you know, it's women's fault that they don't like them kind of thing. And so they get angry and they just kind of spiral.
Is it not true? Yeah. Am I a little bit incel myself?
You got a wife.
I paid a lot of money for her.
I was going to say. Yeah.
No, I guess I want to pull that thread a little bit on exploring, potentially why some of these more heinous crimes tend to be white men.
I mean, I can speak in generalities.
Exactly.
I don't have. Well, that's the thing is what I'm saying is I don't necessarily have like the right people to talk to about would be the profilers and those folks.
Yeah, but I'm talking to Todd. I'm talking to Todd.
Yeah,
not FBI agent.
Well, I mean, you are, but
yeah,
you introduced me as such. Yeah, I'm trying to just basically say like I don't know that stuff.
Okay,
as well as you.
I guess I'll ask the question.
Yeah.
So there's obviously differences between men and women. Our
like
brains.
You're trying to trap me right now.
I fucking am. Yeah, you're cornered.
What
bitch.
is a woman?
what is a woman? There's difference in pigmentation, and some people may interpret this. This is like the nicotine video, where what I say may be misconstrued into thinking that I have some sort of nefarious or racist belief, which I don't. Like I married a Mexican woman. Hello, like that's my. Do you think that there could be? Aside from just pigmentation and muscular density, that there's differences within our brains that ultimately cause white people because just as you describe these backgrounds, and it's like, how are there not these similar backgrounds within other races and cultures? Like they do exist. Like there's just as much as there's angry white people, angry young white males, there's angry young black males and angry young Hispanic males. But why is it that whites act on these
That's
crimes?
like $1 million question, dude. I don't know. It's like I think even the folks at the profilers, even the folks at the behavioral analysis unit, I'm pretty sure they're probably trying to figure out what is the reason why the propensity for these offenders to be young white males, like why? Right.
Yeah.
I don't have that answer at all. I don't know. Yeah. I mean, it could be a societal thing. It doesn't necessarily have to be a genetic thing. It could be a societal thing. It could be that, the cultural differences, exist that are causing that outlet to be how they handle their violence. Whereas, another culture has a different outlet. I don't know.
Along the same category would be why do white males tend to commit suicide at higher rates?
Yeah.
Because I think that the answer is in something that's actually a difference in the brain.
I know from, my time being a bio major that we discussed the topic of free will.
Oh, cool.
And while we were doing that, because it was the symposium we had to do as part of our degree. And like, I remember researching different aspects of the brain and free will and how it all connects and like what makes you and all that. Very emotionally charged because people didn't want to believe that free will doesn't exist.
It doesn't.
So.
And you agree, right?
To an extent.
Yeah,
to an extent. Yeah. I mean, like, did I get to choose which socks I wore today? Yeah. But
sure.
Like
but you're kind of on this track. Like we're all kind of robotic and
biological being.
Sure.
We're not as far removed from the evolutionary tree as we'd like to believe.
Right. Yeah. People would like to think that they have the reins of their life when to a degree, it's like, yeah, you can make these choices, but you're not understanding that you've kind of got this autopilot. Like we all do kind of go through life.
Yeah.
And
well, I mean, you find your wife attractive.
Yeah.
Why do you find her attractive and somebody else might not?
They'd be foolish.
They would be foolish. She's a very lovely person, which, beguiles me that you'd be able to marry her. So.
Yeah, how? She must be a little stupid to marry me.
Yep. Well, it's funny. You could say the same about my wife.
Yeah.
But
sure.
so your experiences, right? Like this thing we call instinct, right?
Yeah.
That like, so the common example would be like you're walking down the street at night, you see an alleyway and the hair stand up on the back of your neck because something feels off, right? Why? Well, because you had an experience when you were a kid that you may not remember where maybe a dog bit you in the alleyway or some crazy dude who was methed out freaked you out, So there could be any number of reasons why that instinct has become a part of who you are. And then there's a structural change to your brain that actually occurs depending on the experiences you have in your life. So like if you've had a pretty traumatic experience, I think your limbic system actually like starts to shrink a little bit because it's just your brain trying to protect itself. So fascinating and totally nerdy. So you're welcome. And I'm pretty sure I got 99% of that wrong. So all 2 people that watch this are going to like urgently Wikipedia it.
We had this conversation the other day. The 2 topics were capital punishment and torture.
Yep.
I believe that in both of those topics that there are instances where they're justified. You're of the opinion that for the purpose of, I think it was punishment. Is that what you were saying?
This again is a personal belief,
Yeah.
right? Like I don't think capital punishment should be used freely. I think we should be revamping the way it gets handled and done. But there are some folks that like you cannot rehabilitate them. They are not people that, by virtue of the terrible stuff they've done, they are not people that should continue to be here. You know, it's very anti-Christian of me, but you know, it is what it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think ultimately it's not about prevention. Like, what are you preventing by killing a dude who murdered a family, you know, and raped a kid? You're not preventing anything.
Our opinions on the matter differ. I believe that it's, rather than for punishment purposes, that it's better to just erase evil incarnate on earth. Mm-hmm. It's almost like a cancer, and you would cut it out of existence. The whole punishment thing, I think you and I both know that you're not going to deter any sort of individual who would commit such a heinous crime from doing it. I think that to objectively make the world a better place, you can eliminate those who are sincerely terrible people.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very subjective way of putting it, though. Like, how do you decide who is subjectively terrible?
Probably the same justification that you would use to determine who would qualify for capital punishment.
And again, that's the reason why, like, while I agree with the general idea of capital punishment, I think it needs to be reformed very heavily, and it should be it should be very sparingly used.
I totally agree. And I think that whatever your justification of it would be is probably, I assume, along the same lines of how I feel as far as determining who would meet the criteria for that, which would be irrefutable evidence that this person did it, because you don't want to have those accidental
or not so accidental, depending on what time and period and place you're in.
Jeffrey Epstein. No.
Oh, gosh.
Speaking of the FBI, no.
Sneak that one in there.
Yeah.
I'm not a capital punishment expert by any means.
Sure.
And I haven't like written a book about this or anything like that. It's just the things I think about. But you know, you have instances where people that were probably innocent have been killed. You have instances where young kids who, like, you know, depending on whether it was racially motivated or not, got lynched by the government, essentially.
Yeah.
You have instances where individuals who have not had the proper mental health care that they probably should have had, and they just spiraled out of control. Those kinds of things I would suggest would be mitigating factors. There's a stark difference between somebody who has a mental health problem and somebody who is a serial killer, you know, or serial murderer, whatever you want to call them, mass murderer, any of those things we can all say objectively bad. You know, being Ted Bundy is objectively bad. You know, being the Walmart shooter, objectively bad, right? That said, or Sandy Hook, right? All just terrible things. I don't think it should be up to a jury. I think it should be the judge that makes the decision on capital punishment, because they are the most objective and erudite individual that's going to be looking at the facts.
Right.
This whole idea of a jury of your peers, what exactly does that mean? It just means
it could be more flawed than a judge.
Yeah. And one person's take on, for instance, their religious stance may be that all killing is bad. Perfectly valid opinion to have. However, in the interest of justice, is that the correct answer? Maybe, maybe not. And therefore, I believe it should be the judge that makes the decision.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
There should be an appeals process that leaves no stone unturned. looks at the inadmissible evidence as well, because there's admissible and inadmissible stuff that goes into every trial. There's just a lot that could probably be done to make it more
foolproof,
rigid.
Yeah,
I think more more strict in its application.
Where do our differences lie? If for me, if I believe that it's more of cutting out the cancer of society,
right?
And you believe that it's a punishment for the individual who will no longer perceive that punishment once it's completed. Mm-hmm. Punishment generally leads to a situation where after the punishment is done, there's reflection on it, or there is no reflection after execution. I guess the only punishment would be the process leading to it. What
I'll say is there are those, like psychopaths, they don't get anything from punishment. Mm-hmm. Their correlation between action and like cause and effect for themselves, it just doesn't exist the way it does for you and I. Like, I know if I hurt you, like what happens on the back end of that. Like, your family will be upset, I'll be upset, all those kinds of things. I know I will have personally hurt you kind of deal. A psychopath doesn't have that. Like, if you whack them on the knuckles for doing something wrong, they're not going to correlate the pain with getting whacked on the knuckles.
They don't learn anything.
They don't learn that. Yeah, they're like a dog in that sense. Like, their brain has not made that connection. So you're right. Punishment isn't for them necessarily. Punishment to remove them from society isn't necessarily for them in the sense that, they're learning anything from it. Mm-hmm. And I don't necessarily, I don't get off on anything that's like super morbid or anything, but, people like Ted Bundy and John Wayne Gacy, mm-hmm. They were like, it's widely understood that Ted Bundy was a blubbering mess and scared to death of going to the chamber. And, I think everybody thinks rightfully so. But and that sounds more vengeance than punishment, but maybe that is the punishment.
I think that side of it doesn't really matter. Like, if you were to remove yourself kind of from the equation and just think what's best for society, it would be to eliminate the individual. And so I kind of believe, and it's interesting because we have different beliefs in like torture, which I look forward to getting to here in just a second. If it was Ted Bundy and he feels fear, some people might be of the opinion that he should feel that as punishment for what he did. Mm-hmm. Because his victims may have felt this intense feeling of panic and dread and all these negative things. But for me, it has nothing to do with kicking him on the way out the door. It's about simply cleaning up the system so that the world is a better place. At the end of the day. So I believe that, families may want the
closure.
The closure. It may, for an understandable reason, make them feel good that they're getting back at the individual who did this to their loved one. I think it's kind of like one of those things where the executioner should be kind of disassociated with the task, knowing that it's something that needs to be done. Not draw attention, like don't bring the public into it. Simply try to get life back on track by executing the individual who, like you said, met all the criteria for being executed, and then move on with it.
Sounds like you've thought a lot about this.
I do. I mean, I really do.
I mean, I'm a little unprepared because it's not something like I've had thoughts about it. It's not something that I'm like prepared to rebut or argue against. I think I can see the slippery slope from your side of like your point of view. It definitely has a slippery slope. So like, where do you stop, right? If you want to cut out the cancer in a society, does that cancer extend to someone who is genetically predisposed to this kind of activity? You're now we're reaching a point
about genocide and things like Hitler and other things where you're trying to create a perfect society,
right?
Which isn't the case. It really comes down to, like I said, strictly speaking, evil that exists. I like if somebody has Down syndrome or some other thing, I think we should lift that person up and take care of those people. And because I think ultimately what governs my way of living, even though I don't execute it perfectly, is I live a life where my choices are based off of what is ultimately kind, and what is kind is what's right, even if it's hurtful. So like, for example, if you're the sort of friend that has a problem with something, there are friends who will tell that person what they want to hear as opposed to what they need to hear, because it's ultimately what's like the right thing to do and what's in the best interest of the individual.
Yeah, I mean, that beard looks great on you.
Thank you. I know you mean it. You know, to segue into like the torture thing, I believe that it's one of those things where in certain instances that torture would be justified. And I know that you don't feel the same way. You believe that there's absolutely no instance, and that the scenario that I gave you would be, and I know it's a hypothetical and maybe you don't prefer hypotheticals, but if there was a like a child, like, and to drive it home even more, it was your child that was in a location that was undisclosed, unknown to you, and the only person who knows is the kidnapper, and that without help that child will die, and the only way to try and get the information from this individual who refuses it, from my perspective, I would try anything, because the life of the child far outweighs the life or the pleasure or whatever this individual who is starting to meet that criteria for execution based off of what I just said before, which would be evil that exists in the world. So I'm going to try and extract the information from them. But you don't think that would be right, even if there was like, even if the guy says, I have this person and you'll never fucking get her and she's going to die.
I know you feel strongly about this because we've had this conversation and you felt very strongly about this.
How can you tell?
Your eyes are burning into the back of my head right now.
Yeah.
I mean, the best part about this is with how heavy a topics we've been covering, there's no chance anyone's going to watch this. So I don't mind telling you what I think, which is, it's like
thanks.
Typical Sunday in the Vela household where we just talk about death and murder and
torture
and child killings. And
I don't even think YouTube will allow this.
Good.
Yeah, good.
Probably for the best. There's a reason why if a personal family member were being held by somebody else, there's a reason why I would not be involved in the investigation.
Sure.
And it's for that purpose. It's because I would be more concerned with vengeance, and I'd be thinking emotionally as opposed to logically about this situation. And therefore, what you're saying is entirely emotionally based. Do I like think in the back of my head that it'd be terrible? Of course I would want the child to come back alive. I'm not discounting that fact, right? I think there are things that are empirically bad and empirically wrong, right? And there are things that are empirically bad, but they can be used for a good purpose. What do I mean by that? War. Is every war bad?
Yeah.
Depends on which side of the argument you're on.
Sure.
Right? Is a war for independence bad? I mean, we're kind of founded on the idea that it's not, right? In my opinion, torture is not something that can be used for good. It is not something that is a tool that is in any way, shape, or form reliable to begin with. It's been proven to not be.
You're talking about the studies that were done for Guantanamo Bay, right? Like you said, I think you brought that up in the past.
I don't remember exactly. Like, I mean, you say studies, and if I say
like with waterboarding,
like
it was.
I know we talked about waterboarding, which like sorry, but he's a former UFC, former Green Beret type that's online talking about how awesome he is because he's former SOF and all this other stuff. And like I think he did like a video where his buddies waterboarded him and then they like had a barbecue after, so he could prove how like not intense it is for people. Okay. It's like, okay, yeah, but you're also special forces and like have been through some shit and like have mentally prepared yourself for it. It's a little bit different when somebody grabs you in the middle of the night and you're, Anyways, I'm railing on somebody who has like 20 times the viewership right now that you do, and you're probably going to get downvoted into oblivion. So
on Reddit,
that's my goal.
That's why I'm here.
Let's crush this video so nobody ever wants to hear me speak again in public. That would be great.
Yeah.
As plainly as I can put it and as simplistically as I can put it, torture is bad. It is never one of those things like, for instance, war, where it can be used for good.
I don't think that you've considered the thing the example that I gave, where what if it got the information?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about a lot of what ifs.
Yeah, but if the person was adamant that they're not going to tell you, like, I know exactly where she is, but then you bring on a level of pain on somebody who is evil.
You're saying they're evil. What's the reason they're doing this?
Is it not evil to take a little girl?
Oh, I never said that. Obviously.
Yeah.
It's not something that I think is
and
okay.
And the individual who does it would therefore be evil?
I think you're trying to walk me into a statement that I'm not making. I am not saying one thing or the other regarding the disposition of an individual who would kidnap a child. I think people justify things in their own minds. We all do it. And when there might be a very good reason why somebody thinks it's okay to take their kid away from somebody else, like, I don't agree with the idea of torture, even in your example.
Even if it saved a life or lives.
Accepting an idea of inflicting serious physical and emotional torture on an individual is acceptable because of the outcome. And I'm saying it's not. I'm saying that, yes, saving a life is obviously important and I want to do that, but I want to do it in a way that makes that life not cheapened. Bad things exist in the world. We don't always get people back when they've been kidnapped. That's just the facts. You know, like, some horrible shit happens to kids every day in this country,
but if it's off the table.
So
if it's off the
what do
table,
you mean off the table?
Like, if torture's off the table in trying to protect this girl, or it could be a bomb, like the Oklahoma City bomber or something like that, and there was some way to prevent it, and the bomb's already been planted. Like, I know that you see these as hypotheticals, which are, in your mind, maybe not.
Yeah, they're not realistic in any way, shape, or form. They're really not.
The point is there have been plenty of instances in the past where people felt as though torture was like and torture carries a super heavy connotation, right? Like,
I'd say it carries a heavy burden on the society which performs it.
Okay, but I mean, just the word itself is a super heavy word.
Sure.
Which means that trying to get you to
I just think I know you're trying to get me to agree with you, and it's interesting because I'm not going to.
I know.
But the idea is simply that you're asking a very subjective question about something that you think is objective, and I disagree subjectively.
I've told you in the past, I always want to, and I want to believe that I'm the sort of individual who's willing to have my eyes opened if there is a reason to feel a certain way or to not feel a certain way. And for me, I currently believe that there are instances when it is for the greater good that it's permissible.
Yeah, what's the greater good?
The greater good would be an innocent life over that of...
Okay, what if the innocent life is the daughter of a narco kingpin, and the reason that this 6-year-old got kidnapped is because it's the daughter of a narco kingpin who, by the way, whacked this dude's family. Is that now okay?
I guess I don't understand, because I still think that the daughter is innocent in this.
Sure, but if that individual is doing it simply to get his family back or something to that effect, is that now inherently evil? Is somebody who steals all the time always bad? If somebody's starving to death and they steal a loaf of bread, is that the same as somebody who's in San Francisco who's stealing $500 worth of perfume to resell on the street? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about it.
So, in my opinion, torture in and of itself is not acceptable. There are plenty of ways that we can find people without torturing somebody. And like, we would have to have devolved into a state of anarchy that is so far beyond what we're at now that I think it would be.
You feel like if the U.S. allowed this, we'd be lost. We would be
yes, because there's a reason to act more superior than the person you are hunting, the person you are working against.
That's why it goes back to capital punishment, though, right? Like,
no, I think you're equating it that way, and I don't.
Well, it's killing. Well, murder would be the unjustified killing of an individual, but it's homicide. It'd be permissible homicide.
I'm not saying draw and quarter the person either.
Yeah.
I don't we're not going to give him the William Wallace treatment. Like, I'm just never going to agree on the topic of torture. I think that
not yet.
You're gonna grind me down, and everybody that
maybe through torture,
all 4 people that watch this are going to be like I appreciate the argument you're making. I get what you're saying. I do, But I also live in a world that absolutes don't necessarily exist as starkly as you might think. As I see it right now, I do not agree with the idea of torture because it makes me as bad as the person that is now committing the crime that I'm trying to stop or investigate.
And I think, just to leave it at our agree to disagree, the reason I feel differently is the intention behind it.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions and all that stuff, right? So,
yeah.
If we allow ourselves to become a group of people where that's permissible, we have then become the villains that we seek to arrest. And I'm not interested in being that person.
Okay. And just to bring it full circle with the nicotine video.
We're back to that now. That's good. This topic brought to you by waterboarding.
And Zyn.
This video is torture and is going to hurt anybody that tries to watch it.
If you can't arrive at why there would ever be an instance where it's justified for torture, then there's something that I want to figure out.
Do the means justify the end kind of thing? I mean, we can all say that war is inherently terrible. I mean, You've seen it up close and personal, and I don't mean to bring up,
It is what it is.
Right. But I mean, you've seen it. You've seen it up close and personal. I've got friends that are, combat vets as well, that kind of thing. And man, I would be pissed if I had lost any of them. Does that necessarily mean the reason they were fighting is bad? No, not necessarily.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot envision a world where I would agree to torturing somebody no matter who I was saving. I mean, there's a reason why the individual who's a family member doesn't get involved in investigations. There's a reason why victim family members get to tell the U.S. Attorney's Office, like, hey, this is like what I think you like. This is what you should shoot for. But they don't have to listen to them.
Right.
And there's a reason for that.
Okay. There's another topic that you and I disagree on, but it's probably best left for.
Well, which is better, Zelda or
yes, Zelda or zombies.
Yeah, which we have not played together yet.
I know, but the other disagreement, which I guess I can allude to, if you would come back for this casting couch session.
Because you're like, we need to wrap this shit up because this is terrible. And I know you said you wanted to talk about what it's like being in the FBI, and we never got there.
I know. People probably want to hear about what it's like to be an FBI agent. But if the conversation doesn't naturally flow that way, then it'll feel forced.
Why, whatever do you mean, Anthony? I am a special agent.
I hope that if any of you are still listening to this conversation, it was about firearms and hardening schools and topics of...
Oh, man, you really don't want to
because we don't disagree. We don't agree.
I think the cat is out of the bag when it comes to guns in this country.
Yeah.
There's more guns than people.
Sure.
And I'm by no means anti-Second Amendment. I understand the purpose for it. I understand the why. Look at the environment in which that amendment was written. We had just kicked the most powerful military out of our colonies yeah. and said we want to be alone and we want to have the right to defend ourselves. And there was no standing military. Yeah. And the understanding was, we have to have militia that can be called up at any minute. Mm-hmm. Minutemen. You're welcome, Lexington and Concord. Massachusetts represent. That environment is what it was meant to, protect against the idea that you're just going to get invaded by a foreign power or an angry, King George, who's pissed that he just lost and he's going to send some more troops your way. I think we lost sight of that in the gun culture that we have. Yeah. But at the same time, I also understand and respect the people that feel that way, that we need to protect ourselves against the government. Yeah. Said the guy who's in the government, right?
Correct me if I'm wrong. Like your opinion is that arming teachers who would want to be armed and go through training, that you don't believe that that's a solution.
I do occasionally provide active shooter training to different organizations, schools, churches, groups, whatever. Mm-hmm. And one of the things we try to point out is that I think the number is 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes before the best police response is going to get to you. The average police response is going to get to you.
In El Paso?
So, I mean...
I guess it depends on what the call is.
It depends.
Yeah.
I know you have your feelings on that.
Don't crash your Paramount.
The El Paso
response
folks.
times will be.
Yeah, crashed my flying machine. Obviously, we're all very happy that you're here.
We'll follow up in the next video to let you know if Todd still has a job.
Have a job. When you see me working at Walmart.
Yeah. I would love it if anybody who's still listening to comment down below your thoughts on some of the topics that we discussed, whether it's capital punishment, torture. Well, I guess that's it. I'll see you guys in the next one if we get extended an episode.
Yeah. Merry Christmas and God bless America.
God bless America.